Summer 1943, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. At precisely 6 seconds past the minute, a German prisoner of war stared in wonder at the bottle in his hand. The brown liquid fizzed and hissed like something alive. He had never seen, let alone tasted, such a drink. After 2 long years in the deserts of North Africa, living on dry biscuits and bitter ersatz coffee, this sweet, sparkling beverage called Coca-Cola felt like an invention from another world. It cost only 5 cents at the prison camp's canteen. Guards casually explained that the same price was what American schoolchildren paid with their pocket money. That single revelation rattled the foundations of everything Nazi propaganda had drilled into these men. By the summer of 1943, across dozens of American POW camps, 371,000 German soldiers were awakening to a reality their leaders had denied them. They found themselves in a country where ice cream wasn't a holiday luxury, but a routine dessert, where soda flowed freely, where candy bars were handed out by guards as though they were nothing. To men from a land where most children had never tasted chocolate, these ordinary American treats felt like miracles, and they began to tear down ideology faster than any leaflet or loudspeaker could. The message was simple, written not in speeches, but in sugar, carbonation, chocolate, and cream. America's industrial strength wasn't chaos. It was abundance. What Germans had been taught to see as noble deprivation was, in the light of this plenty, needless suffering. The North African surrender. When the Africa Corps collapsed in Tunisia in May 1943, 250,000 German and Italian troops entered Allied captivity. Hardened desert veterans, who had once pushed the British Army to the gates of Egypt under Rommel, braced for punishment. Nazi propaganda told them that in American hands, starvation and cruelty awaited. Instead, within hours, they were shocked by their first American field rations. K-rations, grumbled about endlessly by U.S. soldiers, were feasts to these men. Packets contained crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, and cigarettes. For men who had survived on scraps, this was wealth on a plate. U.S. Army records show that even at processing camps in North Africa, prisoners were served pancakes dripping with syrup, fresh eggs, and cold milk, foods that had long since disappeared from German supply lines. A German officer later told the Red Cross, "We expected to be starved. Instead, we were fed better than by our own army." That confusion was the beginning of our education. Across the Atlantic, a lesson in plenty. Then came the journey to America. On Liberty ships, mass-produced at the astonishing pace of 1. Every 42 hours, tens of thousands of German prisoners were carried each month across the ocean. And the food? Identical to what the crew ate, about 3,500 calories daily. Fresh bread, meat, vegetables, coffee with milk and sugar, ship refrigeration, standard for American vessels, kept supplies fresh. Logs even confirm that ice cream was served aboard. On July 4, 1943, the USS General M.B. Stewart celebrated Independence Day by churning out gallons of ice cream for both crew and prisoners. For men who hadn't seen such a dessert since childhood, this moment defied belief. Ice cream in the middle of the Atlantic. When ships docked at Norfolk or Newport News, prisoners glimpsed the impossible. Norfolk Naval Base alone covered more than 4,000 acres, moving in a single day more cargo than German ports managed in a week. At portside shops, POWs saw shelves bursting with candy from Hershey, Mars, and Nestlé. Every bar still cost a nickel, the same price as anywhere else in America. Life in the camps. From the docks, prisoners traveled inland, not in cattle cars, but in passenger coaches. Dining cars served fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. This wasn't special treatment, it was just standard American rail service. At places like Camp Crossville in Tennessee, POWs entered barracks with electric lights, hot water, flush toilets, and heating. But the real shock came from the camp. Exchanges, the PX stores. According to U.S. Army records, these stocked Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, candy bars, ice cream, cigarettes, fresh fruit, and even beer, 3.2% alcohol. Prisoners were paid 80 cents to $1 a day for labor, meaning a single day's wage could buy 16 candy bars or sodas. For Germans, where such items were luxuries even for the elite, this abundance seemed unreal. Coca-Cola soon became the symbol of American power. In 1943 alone, the company produced 5 billion bottles. Every camp received weekly shipments. POWs saw vending machines in factories, schools, even gas stations. Americans drank it so casually they would toss away half-finished bottles, and no matter where it was bought, from Maine to Texas, the taste was identical. To German technicians, this consistency represented a level of industrial coordination far beyond anything their own system achieved. Some camps, like Camp Hearn in Texas, consumed 7,000 bottles per week. Sweet power, sugar, chocolate, and ice cream. Ice cream was another revelation. In Germany, it had vanished years earlier. Yet in American camps, it appeared regularly. On July 4, 1943, Camp Shelby, Mississippi, treated prisoners to hand-cranked ice cream made with ice, cream, and sugar, resources that seemed impossibly extravagant. By 1944, many camps had electric machines producing multiple flavors: vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, even butter pecan. POWs could buy ice cream sandwiches or bars for 10 cents. Sugar, rationed tightly in Germany, flowed freely in America. Civilians back home in Europe received a meager 280 grams a month. In U.S. prison camps, sugar bowls sat on dining tables for unlimited use. Cakes, cookies, and pies appeared often. When one Alabama camp accidentally ruined several hundred pounds of sugar in humid weather, staff simply discarded it and ordered more. The waste horrified German prisoners who had learned to scrape every crumb. Chocolate, too, never stopped flowing. Despite wartime restrictions, Hershey, Mars, and Nestlé produced millions of bars monthly. The U.S. military alone bought 380 million during the war. To Germans raised on scarcity, this candy wasn't just sweet, it was proof of an industrial democracy whose strength lay not in oppression, but in abundance. This is how America won a battle without firing a shot, by letting its prisoners taste what freedom felt like. Bubbled in soda, melted in chocolate, and churned into ice cream. Sweetness, holidays, and ideological collapse. American prison camp stores offered a treasure trove of chocolate during the war years. Shelves carried multiple varieties: standard Hershey bars, the Army's emergency chocolate rations, and an assortment of other bars, each costing between 5 and 10 cents. To German prisoners, the abundance was astonishing. What shocked them most was not simply the availability of chocolate, but the fact that Americans treated brands as a matter of taste. Some preferred Hershey, others Mars or Nestlé. For men raised in scarcity, the idea of choice and luxury was more powerful than propaganda. Every month, the International Red Cross distributed parcels to prisoners, and chocolate was almost always included. The standard package contained candy, bars or chocolate, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, soap, writing paper, and cigarettes. These extras often surpassed what civilians in Germany received as basic rations. Then came Thanksgiving, 1943, the first many German prisoners had ever seen. On that day, every U.S. POW camp served the same traditional meal as American soldiers: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. Coordinating turkey dinners. For over 425,000 prisoners, on top of millions of American servicemen worldwide, showcased industrial and logistical power on a scale Germany had never achieved. Even more unsettling for the Germans was the symbolism. Prisoners of war ate the same meal as their captors. In a single dinner, America shattered the Nazi vision of a racial hierarchy. Christmas of that same year delivered another shock. Ordinary. American civilians, church groups, charities, even families who had sons fighting overseas, sent gifts to the prisoners. The American Friends Service Committee alone shipped 50,000 Christmas packages. These boxes contained homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, games, books, and cigarettes. At camps like Tonkawa, Oklahoma, and Hearn, Texas, locals showed up with trays of cookies and candy for their supposed enemies. For men indoctrinated to expect vengeance, this mercy cut deeper than any weapon. By 1944, with U.S. labor shortages worsening, nearly 100,000 prisoners were assigned to agricultural and food processing work. Here they saw abundance at its source. In Michigan orchards, prisoners picked cherries destined not for survival rations, but for maraschino garnish on ice cream sundaes. Single orchards produced more cherries for decoration than entire regions of Germany managed for daily food. At American canneries, they watched quality inspectors reject tons of perfectly edible fruit for being the wrong size or slightly blemished. Del Monte's records from 1944 show about 15% of produce was discarded from canning lines, often sent to animal feed. To German eyes, this was waste beyond comprehension. Sugar beet fields in Colorado and Nebraska revealed industrial farming on a massive scale. A single farm could yield more beets than entire German provinces. America's total sugar production reached 7 million tons annually, a figure that explained the overflowing bowls of sugar at every mess hall table. In small towns, German laborers even saw early versions of American school lunch programs. Children lined up for hot meals, meat, vegetables, bread, and milk. The daily milk program especially stunned them. To see children guaranteed fresh milk, sometimes even with ice cream available for purchase, while German children starved, exposed the gap between the two nations more brutally than battle. Some minimum security prisoners even ate in American diners under guard. Here they encountered democracy in its purest form, menus that anyone could afford. In 1944, hamburgers cost 25 cents, a Coca-Cola 5 cents, a slice of pie 15 cents, an ice cream sundae 25 cents, and a full dinner between 65 and 75 cents. Bankers and factory workers sat side by side at the same counter, ordering the same food, served by the same waitress. This simple equality contradicted everything the Nazi system had promised. As prisoners gained access to American newspapers and publications, raw statistics completed the demolition of ideology. Sugar, 7 million tons annually. Chocolate and cocoa, 380 million pounds for the military alone. Coca-Cola, 5 billion bottles in 1943. Ice cream, over 500 million gallons annually. Milk, 119 billion pounds in 1944 by comparison. Germany's production looked pitiful. Sugar rationed to crumbs, chocolate reserved for the military elite, soft drinks almost non-existent, ice cream vanished, milk reduced to starvation levels. For Germans, these figures were devastating. They proved that American wartime production exceeded Germany's peacetime peaks. By late 1944, the flow of parcels reversed. German prisoners, earning wages inside U.S. camps, began purchasing American goods to send home. International Red Cross. Records confirm that they shipped 11 million packages back to Germany during the war, filled with chocolate, coffee, canned meat, and other foods. Families in ruined German cities now survived on the generosity of men officially in captivity. As Allied forces advanced into Germany in spring 1945, POWs in America saw newsreels of GIs handing out chocolate and gum to German children. The sight of their own nation's children overjoyed at American candy, while the Reich could not even feed them bread, was shattering. Nazi promises of triumph had ended in empty stomachs. When concentration camps were liberated, American soldiers shared rations with survivors. German POWs watched film reels of emaciated prisoners given chocolate, soup, and cigarettes. The contrast was undeniable. The regime they had served delivered death. The enemy offered life. Between 1945 and 1946, German prisoners were repatriated. Many returned healthier and heavier than when captured, while their families in freedom had wasted away. Some carried Red Cross packages, Hershey bars, tins of coffee, and canned meat that became sacred treasures for their starving children. A child who had forgotten the taste of chocolate now unwrapped a bar brought home by a father who had eaten ice cream regularly behind American barbed wire. These returning prisoners became unexpected voices for rebuilding. Having lived inside America's system of abundance, they understood prosperity was not stolen through conquest, but created through production and fairness. When the Marshall Plan began, many former POWs became its quiet supporters because they had tasted the proof in Coca-Cola, in chocolate, and in ice cream. During the war years, German prisoners of war in America were introduced to a world that fundamentally challenged everything they had been taught about superiority, scarcity, and strength. They discovered pounds upon pounds of chocolate products circulating even in prison camps. Exchanges offered Hershey bars, emergency rations, and various candy bars for only a few cents. Prisoners quickly realized that Americans had the luxury of preference, casually choosing one chocolate brand over another, something unimaginable in a Germany where scarcity defined daily life. Red Cross parcels delivered monthly added to this abundance: chocolate bars, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, and soap. These were not just rations but luxuries, often exceeding what German civilians received in freedom. Thanksgiving of 1943 revealed an even greater contrast. Across American prison camps, German prisoners sat down to the same feast as American soldiers: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. The ability to serve a traditional holiday dinner to both soldiers and enemy captives spoke volumes about America's organizational might and generosity. Christmas that same year deepened the shock. American civilians, church groups, civic organizations, even small-town families sent thousands of holiday packages to German prisoners, filled with homemade cookies, candy, books, games, and writing materials. In Oklahoma and Texas, local communities baked treats for the very men whose countrymen were fighting their sons overseas. For prisoners, this kindness from supposed enemies contradicted Nazi ideology at its core. As the war continued and labor shortages grew, German prisoners worked outside the camps, gaining intimate exposure to America's agricultural and industrial abundance. In Michigan orchards, they picked cherries destined not for survival, but for maraschino garnish, topping ice cream sundaes in diners. They watched canneries discard fruit for minor imperfections, waste that in Germany would have been a treasure. In Nebraska and Colorado, sugar beet production revealed mechanization and yields that dwarfed anything they had ever seen. They realized America was producing millions of tons of sugar annually, fueling the candy, soda, and dessert culture they were now witnessing firsthand. By 1944, some 100,000 prisoners were working in agriculture and food processing. They saw milk programs in schools where American children received daily hot lunches with protein, vegetables, and fresh milk. Some cafeterias even sold ice cream to children. To Germans whose children faced hunger, this casual abundance was incomprehensible. Prisoners who occasionally ate in American diners under guard saw menus available to anyone: hamburgers for 25 cents, Coca-Cola for 5 cents, pie slices for 15 cents, ice cream sundaes for a quarter. A factory worker and a bank president could sit side by side, paying the same price for the same meal. For men raised in a rigid hierarchy, this democratic abundance struck deeply. Statistics reinforced what their eyes witnessed. American sugar output reached 7 million tons. Chocolate and cocoa products for the military alone topped 380 million pounds. Coca-Cola produced 5 billion bottles, ice cream more than 500 million gallons, and milk 119 billion pounds in 1944. German production in those same years was minimal, rationed, and insufficient. Prisoners began sending American goods home with camp wages: chocolate bars, instant coffee, canned meat, parcels that reached starving German families from sons who were technically captives. By war's end, over 11 million such parcels had been sent, turning the logic of Nazi superiority on its head. Even American rationing, which citizens grumbled about, exceeded what German civilians could dream of. 2 pounds of sugar per month per person, 28 ounces of meat per week. These were luxuries compared to Germany's starvation-level allowances. Soft drinks, meanwhile, flourished in America. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush. Billions of bottles circulated annually, reaching every gas station and corner store. For prisoners, the sheer variety and efficiency of distribution showed a kind of industrial democracy that no authoritarian system could match. By 1945, the lesson was inescapable. Prisoners saw newsreels of American GIs handing out chocolate and gum to German children in occupied towns. They saw skeletal survivors of camps being fed American rations. They realized that while the Reich had promised triumph, it had delivered starvation, while America carried enough abundance to share freely with enemies and victims alike. When prisoners returned to Germany in 1946, many carried extra weight from 3 daily meals, ice cream and sodas, while their families in freedom were gaunt from hunger. They brought Hershey bars, coffee, and canned goods that became treasures at home. Children who had forgotten the taste of chocolate bit into Hershey bars delivered by fathers who had eaten ice cream in captivity. The lesson endured. Former prisoners applied what they had seen: mass production making luxuries affordable, standardization ensuring quality, abundance fostering political stability. These men became unexpected advocates of the Marshall Plan and leaders in Germany's economic recovery. Coca-Cola returned to West Germany in 1949. Ice cream parlors sprang up. Candy bars became everyday items. Former prisoners imported American food products, not just for taste, but for the ideas they represented: abundance, democracy, modernity. Supermarkets arrived in the 1950s, modeled after stores they had seen in the U.S., driven by men who understood that prosperity required new distribution as much as production. In memoirs and interviews decades later, former prisoners described their transformation. One recalled, "We expected to defeat a weak America. Instead, we found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire world view." Another said of his first Coca-Cola, "It was sweet, fizzing, unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't: abundant, democratic, joyful." Their testimonies echoed the conclusion of historian Arnold Kramer, who demonstrated that food abundance achieved what re-education could not: the destruction of Nazi myths of superiority. Every meal in captivity became a lesson in capacity. Every soda bottle showed distribution. Every ice cream sundae revealed democracy's ability to create luxury for all. These sensory memories proved more powerful than any lecture. They had tasted freedom, and it was sweet. Over time, their stories shaped German-American relations, inspired their children to study in America, and helped embed the culture of consumer abundance in West Germany's recovery. Today, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, ice cream, and supermarkets are ordinary in Germany, but their roots trace back to those extraordinary prison camp experiences. German prisoners of war learned in America that true strength did not come from conquest, but from creation, from a society so wealthy it could afford to give its enemies chocolate and ice cream. In the end, the war was not only won on battlefields, but also in dining halls and soda fountains. The men who once fought for a world built on scarcity were transformed by a nation built on abundance. They carried home the undeniable truth that democracy could be tasted in a Hershey bar, seen in a sundae, and heard in the fizz of a Coca-Cola bottle. It was a victory won not through destruction, but through generosity, an ideology defeated not by bullets, but by ice cream,